Welcome to This Explainer. So, what if I told you the secret to rapid economic growth wasn't buried in some modern textbook, but actually in an ancient cultural ritual? It sounds crazy, right? But today, we're exploring a fascinating homegrown governance model that is absolutely transforming Rwanda. We're going to look at a totally unique national strategy that bridges the gap between pre-colonial history and cutting-edge accountability.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's a massive, fascinating question. How exactly did an ancient warrior's vow build a booming modern economy? To really understand Rwanda's post-1994 development, we have to look at the specific, on-the-ground mechanisms they used to actually get things done. So we're taking a chronological journey today, tracing a single, powerful idea from the battlefields of the past all the way to the executive offices of the present. The foundation of our entire explainer really rests on this single concept, Imihigo. It's a Kinyarwanda word, and it translates directly to vowing to achieve. At its core, it represents a traditional Rwandan practice of creating public performance contracts. And look, this isn't just about making some quiet, personal New Year's resolution. Imihigo is about setting ambitious, highly measurable targets and then publicly committing to crushing them within a very specific time frame. To see exactly where this started, we've got to flash back to pre-colonial Rwanda. Picture this. Before embarking on any major endeavor, warriors and regional leaders would gather in a highly formal setting right before the Mwami or the king, alongside all of their peers. This wasn't just a casual get-together. It was a deeply ingrained cultural ritual rooted in military culture and royal court dynamics. During these intense gatherings before the king, leaders would actually stand up and recite these highly poetic vows. These were the original Imihigo. They were declaring extraordinary, very specific feats that they literally promised to accomplish. We're talking about going to war, expanding territory, or undertaking major civic tasks like protecting a whole village. This was basically a self-imposed challenge rooted deeply in personal integrity. If you fulfilled your Imihigo, boom, you were rewarded with prestige, land, royal recognition, the whole shebang. But if you failed, oh man, it brought intense social stigma and a devastating loss of honor, a state known as guhiga. The stakes were incredibly high. Okay, now let's fast forward a bit to the year 2006. Rwanda is facing the incredibly daunting challenge of post-genocide reconstruction. The country desperately needs to rebuild, but, like a lot of governments, they're hitting severe bureaucratic inertia. Things just were not moving fast enough. So to decentralize governance and smash through this stagnation, the Rwandan government decided to actually look backward in order to move forward. In 2006, they officially resurrected this cultural heritage of Imihigo, completely transforming it from an ancient ritual into a modern administrative architecture. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole evolution. On one hand, you've got ancient warriors passionately promising new territory to the king. And on the other, you have modern mayors in tailored business suits standing right before the president, promising miles of newly paved roads and infrastructure. The context is totally changed, sure, but the underlying psychological mechanism, that very public personal commitment to deliver measurable results, is exactly the same. So, how does this modern accountability machine actually work in practice? Well, it's broken down into a super rigorous 4-step cycle. Step 1, ambitious annual targets are set, and I mean everywhere, from national cabinet ministers all the way down to local mayors, sector leaders, and even individual households. Step 2 is the public signing. Just like those warriors of the past, leaders publicly sign their annual Imihigo contract, often right there in front of the president. Step 3 involves continuous monitoring throughout the year to make sure projects are actually on track. And finally, Step 4, a highly visible public evaluation and ranking process. Let's look a little closer at that evaluation step, because honestly, this is where the system gets its teeth. At the end of each fiscal year, these results aren't just quietly graded by a boss in some back office. No way. They are evaluated by an independent panel made up of academics and civil society members. Then, the intense public scrutiny kicks in. The outcomes are presented at a massive annual national ceremony led by the president. And during this ceremony, districts are actually publicly ranked based on their scores. It creates this fierce, totally results-driven competition between the regions. And the consequences of this public ranking are very, very real. High-performing mayors are praised, recognized, and often promoted. But the underperforming mayors, they face intense public scrutiny, official reprimands, and in a lot of cases, forced resignation. I want you to just pause and think about that for a second. Imagine your own local mayor having to stand up on national television
and publicly resign simply because they didn't hit their annual pothole repair quota or their economic growth target. It is a high-stakes reality that pretty much eliminates complacency in local government.
Now, today, this Imihigo framework isn't just about basic day-to-day governance. It's actively being deployed to solve massive macroeconomic challenges, specifically deconcentrating Kigali. Historically, the capital city of Kigali has been the primary economic engine of Rwanda. But, like so many booming capital cities around the world, it faces the real threat of over-urbanization. To curb this, the national government is using the Imihigo system to basically force balanced regional development outward across the rest of the country. Now, what's really interesting about this strategy is just how specific these development goals are. Instead of random, unstructured growth, each of these 6 secondary cities is assigned a totally unique role through their Ikimihigo targets. For example, Rubavu and Musanze act as hubs for cross-border trade and guerrilla trekking tourism. Meanwhile, cities like Huye drive academic culture and heritage, while Muhanga is literally transforming into a heavy industrial and mining center. Every single local mayor in these regions has their career directly tied to hitting these highly tailored strategic goals. To actually execute this incredible strategy, the government enforces key initiatives through some very strict Imihigo metrics. First up is infrastructure parity. Mayors are graded on extending asphalt road networks, putting up street lighting, and pushing digital services way outside the capital. Second, they have district-level economic targets, and these are directly tied to local job creation and attracting private sector investment. And third, the national government is actively deconcentrating services. They're relocating state administrative facilities, universities, and specialized hospitals out of Kigali. This ensures these secondary cities become truly self-sustaining regional capitals. So the crucial point is this macro takeaway: indigenous solutions for modern statecraft. Imihigo perfectly illustrates Rwanda's broader post-1994 governance philosophy. Rather than just relying solely on rigid, imported Western administrative frameworks, which, let's be honest, often fail to resonate with local populations, they leverage pre-colonial traditions. Alongside Imihigo, they've utilized Gacaca community courts for justice and Umuganda community service for neighborhood development. This really proves that homegrown cultural concepts can be successfully adapted to drive high accountability, civic pride, and incredibly swift institutional execution. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought. When we face the complex administrative and economic hurdles of the 21st century, we so often look for the newest technology or the absolute latest international policy trend. But, as the resurrection of Imihigo shows us, sometimes the most effective tools for modern accountability are already written in our history. It really makes you wonder, could your own country's oldest traditions hold the hidden key to solving its future challenges? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this sparked your curiosity.